Welcome inside TD Garden, everybody. My name is Mike Petraglia, joined by Sam Packard, Celtics writer for WEEI.com. We saw a little bit of history here today, Sam. The Celtics erase a 26-point first-half deficit, first half in which they didn't show up at all, quite frankly, and they storm back in the second half, outscoring the Miami Heat by a total of 60-26, winning this game going away, believe it or not, 98-88. What does it all mean? Well, the Celtics finish with a record of 48-24, along with three other teams in the Eastern Conference. That's a four-way tie for the fourth best record in the Eastern or for the third best record in the Eastern Conference. But what it means is the Miami Heat, despite blowing a 26-point lead, they win the Southeast Division. They will be the number 3 seed going into the playoffs. The Celtics will be the number 5 seed as the Atlanta Hawks, they lost, believe it or not, to the Washington Wizards on Wednesday night in the regular season finale. The Celtics, kind of, I think, a little bit unfair. They get the 5 seed. They'll start the playoffs this weekend on the road in Atlanta. What do you make of everything we saw Wednesday night?
Oh, it's kind of funny. Jay Crowder, after the game, kind of laughed and said, we came all the way back for this? It's really shocking that the Miami Heat would lose this game and then end up as the highest seed, but that's the way the NBA rules work, with a division winner gets the 3 seed. Right. For momentum's sake, the Celtics needed to play well, because this is the second or third straight game they really have played poorly, especially in the first half. Second straight game where they gave up more than 60 points in the first half. So for them to come back in that third quarter and only give up 5 points and hold the Heat to 20 or 10% from the field, 2 for 20, was something they really needed to do before going into the playoffs. It's unfortunate that they actually lost home court advantage because the crowd was rocking here tonight, and you kind of saw what might have been. But they have the potential to actually go into Atlanta, steal one of the first 2 games, and then take home court advantage coming back to Boston.
You would not expect Brad Stevens to throw chairs around, upset tables in the locker room, and he didn't. As a matter of fact, after the game, he said that at halftime he just asked the players, who do you want to be? Do you want to be a team that can compete for championships, which is what the Celtics are all about, obviously. The halftime ceremony was ironic. The 66 champs, the 76 champs, and the 86 champs were all in the building. They all witnessed what we witnessed in that first half. Bill Belichick was in the building, sitting right behind us, as a matter of fact, underneath the Celtics basket. Nobody could believe it. And the Celtics flat out were embarrassed, and Brad Stevens put it to his players, who do you want to be?
Yeah, and the players said it was classic Brad, cool, calm, and collected, but they could tell he was angry. And he came in and said, basically challenged them kind of as men and as basketball players, that they had to step up and they had to show effort, because it's really, they'd been dominated the past 10 quarters at that point, and the players responded perfectly. The defense was swarming in that third quarter and really got back to kind of the basic principles, which led to the Celtics winning a bunch of games this season, which made them win 48 games this season. It all starts in their defense, and that leads to easy baskets in transition, and that's what happened tonight. And that's what they're going to need to do against the Atlanta Hawks, who have a very good offensive system, are great passers. Of course, Mike Budenholzer comes from the Greg Popovich Spurs system, and that's what they're going to need to do. They're going to need to play that swarming defense if they want a chance to beat the Hawks in round 1.
I have a question for you, Sam, a very basic, simple question. Do you trust these Celtics going into the playoffs?
I do. I think that we saw it tonight when it was on the line and they needed to come out. They could have easily just folded and kind of just let the Heat win. It actually might have ended up with a better playoff position. They would have ended up with a 6 and ended up playing this very Heat. But we saw that they have fight in them, and they're not going to back down. We saw at the end of the third quarter they got in that little scrum with Goran Dragic after he pushed Marcus Smart. Right. These guys are playing for each other, and they're playing hard, and they want to win. They were embarrassed in that first quarter, and they stepped up and showed what they were made of, and that they can play with basically any team in the East.
Now, the Celtics held the Miami Heat to 2 for 20, as you mentioned earlier, from the field in that third quarter. Brad Stevens, after the game, told us that it was just the simple fact of get up into the ball, pressure the ball, and we're not going to make every single shot. We're not going to force a turnover every single time down the floor, but make it difficult on the opposition, in this case, the Miami Heat. Now, what I found interesting from the Miami perspective is, and we looked at each other in the first quarter, they were scoring at will in the paint. I think 28 of their first 32 points or 33 points were in the paint. Why did they get away from that? Did the Celtics do a good enough job simply of taking that away?
I think part of it is what Brad Stevens says, getting into the ball, because if you make that entry pass into the paint more difficult, it's just not as easy to score points. And I think the Celtics were a lot more aggressive on defending that kind of, they were fronting in the post a little bit more. We saw Avery Bradley make a number of steals, just trying to work his way around the person posting up. So I think they did a better job of keeping the ball outside of the paint. And when the Heat kind of got frustrated, we saw them go to kind of ISO Joe Johnson and ISO Dwayne Wade, which was not what's getting them baskets early in the game. They were making some tough shots, but when the Heat were really at their best, they were working the ball to the weak side and then finding Whiteside for lobs. So when the ball movement stopped and the Celtics' defensive intensity rose, the Heat kind of just wilted and relied on, let's give the ball to Joe Johnson in the corner, let's give the ball to Dwayne Wade and just see what happens.
All right, let's look ahead, because that's what we do in this business, and that is look ahead to the Atlanta Hawks. You mentioned Mike Budenholzer. He comes from the Greg Popovich system. Who on the Hawks do you fear the most?
It's got to be Paul Millsap. He absolutely destroyed them on Saturday night. He's kind of that perfect defensive player. He can shoot threes. He's very good rebounder. He's inside, outside. The Celtics need to shut him down. But the thing with the Hawks is that you shut down Millsap, Horford could have a big game. Jeff Teague could have a big game. Yeah. And Kyle Korver, who's actually struggled early in the year with his shooting, has, since the All-Star break, has really upped his percentage. And that's the great thing about the Hawks. And it's kind of like the Celtics that any person can really take the scoring load any night.
Well, I take some encouragement from the fact that on Saturday night they led the Hawks in their own in Atlanta 71-69, and it just all fell apart. If they can get to that point and close out and play the kind of defense that they showed in the second half here on Wednesday night, I think they have a very good chance of winning this series.
I think it really all comes down to the play and the health, actually, of Isaiah Thomas. We saw him not really produce in that fourth quarter against the Hawks. He's had not a great game against the Hornets, and then a little bounce back here tonight, but still wasn't great early on. I think he ended the game 4 for 15. He only got most of his points at the free throw line. And I asked him after the game about his wrist, and he says, yeah, it's something that's still bothering him, but it's just going to be something he has to deal with. So his health, and then also the health of Jay Crowder, who's also not 100% with his ankle, if they can play kind of close to the level they were playing at earlier in the season, I think the Celtics have a big chance. But if either of those two guys are hindered by their injuries, it's going to be tough for the Celtics, especially playing those games in Atlanta.
Obviously, it's looking way ahead, but the Celtics, by virtue of winning this game and not losing it, will, if they get by the Hawks, will more than likely have another rematch with the LeBron James-led Cavaliers in the second round. But that, again, is getting ahead of ourselves. The Celtics do take care of business, I think, most importantly, Sam, for their own self-esteem, their own confidence, their mental approach to things going forward. They come from 26 points down in the second half, and they beat the Miami Heat by a score of 98-88 here Wednesday night in the regular season finale before the 1966, 76, and 86 world champions, before Bill Belichick. I think it gives them some momentum going forward. They finished the regular season 48-34. We'll have all the coverage starting this weekend on WEEI.com, the Green Street blog, as the Celtics begin the playoff season in Atlanta against the Hawks. Games 1 and 2 in Georgia. Games 3 and 4 would be back here in Boston at TD Garden. Until then, he is Sam Packard. I'm Mike Petraglia inside TD Garden, WEEI.com.